Now to the official business of the morning. It's my honor to introduce our first speaker. One of the things about longevity is you get to be on the steering committee. So as a member of the steering committee for this trip, we thought it was important that our group hear about all the impressive things that Charlotte is doing to move this community forward. And we have heard that over the last day and a half. We also thought that maybe there might be a second view out there that we should hear, and we've asked Taylor Batten to come and give us, Taylor, here's the pressure for you, buddy, a view from a local that is in the know to learn about what is really happening in Charlotte. So you might check your notes and make sure that's what we got. But I'm sure this is going to be a wonderful presentation. Taylor is with the Charlotte Observer. He's been recognized as one of the best in the state. He's written for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, and the Dallas Morning News. Before becoming the editorial pages editor, he was a business reporter covering local and state government. He's been with the Observer for 20 years. His bio is in your booklet. It's very interesting. I look forward to bringing Taylor to the stage to hear the real truth about Charlotte. Taylor, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Harold. I understand that I'm the only thing standing between you all and Hugh Mccoll, and that is never a good place to be. So I will try to be as brief as possible and get out of the way and let you all hear from Hugh Mccoll, who you have already heard apparently was a key father of this city, and so he'll be a good person for you all to hear from. Does anyone know who this guy is? Does anyone know who this guy is? This is Joe Pesci, also known as My Cousin Vinny, also known as Vinny Gambini from the movie My Cousin Vinny. Have any of y'all seen this movie, My Cousin Vinny? Okay. All right, so that's a lot of you. A lot of you then know what it's about. He's a brash, outspoken New York lawyer, comes down to Alabama to defend his nephew and his friend in a murder trial, but he's a very inexperienced lawyer. And so he falls asleep during the prosecution's opening statement, and the prosecution finishes their opening statement. His nephew nudges Vinny to tell him it's his turn to give his opening statement, and he wakes up, doesn't really know what's going on. He walks over to the jury box, has nothing to say, and he says, "Yeah, everything that guy just said is bull bleep." That was his opening statement. So I kind of feel like that's my assignment today from the planning committee. You all have spent the last couple of days hearing from all these great Charlotte leaders about everything that Charlotte's doing right, and now I'm supposed to come in and tell you everything that guy just said is bull bleep. So this is a really difficult assignment for me because, in truth, I really love Charlotte, and we are doing a lot of things right. And so, I don't want to come in here and be seen as somebody who only sees the bad things about Charlotte. Part of that is because this is the house that I lived in from age 3 to 6. It's less than a mile from here. I lived in Charlotte from age 3 to 6 before moving to Miami. My parents lived in 9 cities in 18 years before moving to Miami, and then we lived there for 20 years. And somehow, through 9 cities in 18 years and then 20 years in Miami, Charlotte was always home. Felt like home to my parents, to my brother and sister, and even to me, even though I left here when I was 6 years old. It just had a tug well beyond any kind of proportional tug that it should have had on us from only being here for a few years. So in 1995, I was graduating from graduate school. I had job offers from the Boston Globe, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Charlotte Observer. So most of my classmates and friends assumed I would go to Boston or Philadelphia. They seemed like bigger, more prestigious papers. But I ended up coming to Charlotte because it just, again, had that tug on me and it felt like home. I tell you all of that only so that you know where I come from, that I come from a place of loving this city and not coming here to badmouth it. It's true that I write a lot of critical things day in and day out on our opinion pages, but truthfully, a lot of that is aimed at state government, and things that are local a lot of times are more episodic and not really so much systemic or concerns about the overall direction of the city, because the city is on a good track. In fact, the city did a survey of its residents, I think in the past several months, and you might hear about this more from Ron Carley later today. And in that survey, 90% of the respondents said that they were very or somewhat likely to recommend Charlotte to their friends as a place to live. So people who live here like it here, and there's a lot of good things to be said about it. Okay, still, I have a job to do. The planning committee asked me to be objectively critical, give you all the true perspective on other things about Charlotte that you might not have heard. So as I thought about what Charlotte needs to work on and its challenges and opportunities, it kept coming back to things that Charlotte really does well, but there's another side to it. So I've come up with 6 things where, yes, Charlotte is doing this well, but there's another facet of that issue that I want to talk to you about. So the first one, I'll go through these 6 really quickly, and then we can have a few questions, and then I'll get out of your way for Hugh Mccoll. The first of the 6. Yes, Charlotte was built on public-private partnerships. I don't know if that has been a theme at all for you all on this trip, but public-private partnerships have been going on in Charlotte for decades and have really been what's to credit for a lot of the good things that are happening here. Yes, but now that model is under a lot of stress because both the public and the private half of that public-private partnership, they're each facing pressures that make it harder for them to enter into those kind of partnerships. On the private side, speaking of Hugh McColl, on the left there is Hugh McColl. He was the chairman and CEO of Bank of America. He built the largest bank in the country and based it in Charlotte from a very small bank. And as he did this, building the bank and building Charlotte completely went hand in hand. There was really no distinction. What was good for the city was good for the bank. What was good for the bank was good for the city. And it really was not an afterthought of McCall's. It was central to the mission of the bank. Not only were they trying to build a bank and make a lot of money, but they were remaking the landscape of Charlotte. On the right is Brian Moynihan. He's the current CEO of Bank of America, and I think he's doing a very good job, but building Charlotte is not on his list of things to do. He lives in Boston. I don't know if he owns a house or an apartment here, but if he does, he doesn't spend much time in it. Comes down occasionally, but he's got a lot of other concerns right now with running Bank of America, including understating their assets by billions of dollars recently. And so he's got global concerns, and I'm sure he cares about Charlotte, but building Charlotte is not on his radar like it was for Hugh McColl. The same is true of Ed Crutchfield and John Stump. Ed Crutchfield on the left was the CEO of First Union, which became Wachovia, which became Wells Fargo. And Ed was a lot like McCall. In fact, their rivalry is really what built Charlotte. McCall was on the north end of Tryon Street, and First Union and Ed Crutchfield were down here on the south end of Tryon Street, and they always tried to outdo each other, not only in building their banks larger, but also in building their halves of Charlotte. And so that was a really healthy competition. John Stump, great CEO. I think he's really highly regarded in the banking industry, but he's in San Francisco, and again, building Charlotte is not something that's very high on his list. So the big corporations in Charlotte are still civically involved, but not like they used to be. It's a lower level, lower ranking people within those companies that sit on the civic boards, and you just don't have the corporate leadership that used to drive these public-private partnerships. And then on the public side, there's a different dynamic there too. I think you have, frankly, in some cases, lower quality elected leaders. Some of them have a very narrow geographic interest. They're concerned about their district, but they're not as passionate about serving the entire city. And then they also just face some political pressures as the city has grown and the demographics have changed. There are new political dynamics and more pressures on them not to engage in some of these public-private partnerships. And so that is really, all of this is hemming in our ability to invest in infrastructure the way that we have to as we continue to grow and try to be a great city. I mean, we're going to be a metro region probably of 2 million people in the next, 15, 20 years. And not having those public-private partnerships thrive quite as much as they used to is making it hard to invest the way we should. Okay, the second yes but is Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. Yes, Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools are regarded as a model around the country for the way it won the Broad Prize for the best urban school district in the nation. Yes, but only 43% in that survey I mentioned before of city residents, only 43% of the respondents gave CMS high ranks. And that put us well below the benchmark of what other cities, how they rated their schools. Now, it's true that there were some smaller cities in that survey, and so I guess smaller cities in general are going to probably be happier with their school system maybe than bigger urban systems. But either way you slice it, well over half of Charlotte's residents have serious concerns about the quality of their school system, and that's concerning. One of the reasons that they have those concerns is there are huge achievement gaps. This is not unique to us, of course, but the separation between minorities and whites and between low-income and high-income students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools are enormous. And we're making a lot of efforts as a community to address those, but it's proven to be a really sticky problem. I'm not going to go into Project Lift. I don't know if you all have heard of that, but you need to learn about it. But its results are mixed so far, despite intense attention and $55 million plowed into these troubled schools. A couple of years ago, I wrote a column off of our new NAEP scores, the nation's report card. 84% of Charlotte's black 8th graders were not proficient in math. 84%. Now, believe it or not, that actually was not any worse than almost any other urban school district in the nation, but it still tells me that we have a really long way to go. It's that phenomenon that partially helps explain why a recent study by some researchers at Harvard and Cal Berkeley came out. It ranked 50 metro regions around the country on social mobility, income mobility, and Charlotte ranked dead last on income mobility, and that was measured by the likelihood of a kid whose parents are in the lowest quintile of income, their ability to move for the children to move to the highest quintile of income. They researched 50 metro regions, and Charlotte came in dead last. So we obviously have work to do there. We have a lot of successes on things that a local radio talk show host calls shiny new thingies. And I don't agree with this talk show host on a lot of things, but he's right that Charlotte invests a lot of time and attention in shiny new thingies. We have Bank of America Stadium for the Panthers. On the right, upper right, we've got the Uptown Arena for the Bobcats, now Hornets. We have the new minor league baseball stadium, the Skyline background, the Whitewater Center that I think some of you all visited, the NASCAR Hall that's right across the street. We're great at building buildings. All those things are great, and I've personally enjoyed every one of them. But they don't do a whole lot to create community, a sense of place, or a soul for the city of Charlotte. You know, some cities, there's no mistaking where you are. Boston, San Francisco, New Orleans, Memphis, you know where you are. Those cities have a soul. They're distinctly that place. Charlotte is kind of any place USA. You know, we are the button-down bankers. No offense to the bankers, I'm buttoned down. But we are the button-down, 9 to 5, 2.2 kids and a labradoodle. And our idea of historic preservation is to put up a signpost after we tear down the historic building, and put a signpost marking that there used to be a historic building there. In that city survey that I've mentioned a couple of times, half of the respondents said that Charlotte really lacks a sense of community, and I think they're onto something. The fourth yes but, transit and transportation. Yes, we have the Lynx Blue Line. That's been a great addition to this community. It runs about 10 miles from the far south of Charlotte into uptown. I don't know if you all have seen this or experienced it. And we are now building it out an additional 9 miles up to the university in the northern part of town. So it's going to be about a 20-mile light rail line running from the far south to the far north. And that's great. It's been a big success. It has good ridership, but it's really pretty limited. If you don't live right near the rail line, it's not something that's too relevant to your life. And that's about all we have for mass transit. The bus system is underwhelming. We have nothing going out Independence Boulevard, which is our main thoroughfare to the south. We have nothing going up to the bedroom communities. And so 77 is a parking lot every morning and every afternoon. We have almost nothing going out to the airport. And then equally concerning, we don't have any idea how we're going to fund all those things going forward. Again, this city is going to continue to grow. Its transit needs are going to continue to grow. We have a dedicated half-cent sales tax for that, but it's projected to come up with a small fraction of the money we need to build the transit infrastructure that we're going to need. That city survey that I keep mentioning put us far below the benchmark of other cities on things like ease of driving around town, traffic flow, public parking, anything around traffic. Our scores on that survey were not good. And then related to all this, Charlotte is the worst city in America for pedestrians, walkability, and we're not too good for cyclists either. A national rating system called Walk Score ranked nearly 3,000 cities in the United States, Australia, and Canada on walkability. And of the 74 U.S. cities over 250,000 in population, Charlotte ranked 74th, dead last on walkability. This put us behind places like Jacksonville and Fort Worth that you don't really think of as unusually friendly to pedestrians. A couple of years ago, 2 children, ages 1 and 5, were killed as they were walking to daycare with their father. The 1-year-old was in a stroller, the 5-year-old was walking with his father. And this was in an area where residents had been calling for a sidewalk for years, and there was no sidewalk there. And they were forced to walk on the side of the street. And I think it was a FedEx truck, I shouldn't malign the company, I don't know if UPS or FedEx, came around this corner and hit these kids and killed them. And it really galvanized the community because it was just so emblematic of our unfriendliness to pedestrians and lack of sidewalks, and going back to the shiny new thingies. We've got uptown arenas and new baseball stadiums, but we don't have a sidewalk in a high traffic area, and 2 little kids are killed. The city said it didn't have the money for that sidewalk. After the 2 kids were killed, about 5 minutes later, they found the money. But then even so, only now, in the last month or 2, is that sidewalk been constructed. And this accident was 2 years ago. So 2 years later, we finally have a sidewalk that we should have had a long time ago. The fifth and next to last, yes, but arts and culture. Yes, we have a thriving arts and culture scene. We have fantastic symphony, opera, theater, ballet, traditional and modern art museums, history museums, and the list goes on and on. Again, I've personally enjoyed all of these things. Yes, but the financial model that built all these things over the past 30 or 40 years is in a huge state of flux right now. We used to have one of the best two United Arts funds in the country. Raised $12 or $14 million a year to invest in our arts and culture scene. It took a huge dip in the recession, and it's never recovered. Part of that is, again, the corporate leadership is a little bit less focused on it than it used to be. Part of it is that companies used to run employee campaigns that would benefit the Arts and Science Council. All they did was the Arts and Science Council in the United Way. Now a lot of our biggest companies have opened those campaigns up to where employees can donate to any organization of their choosing, and not just an arts one, not just a human services one, but anything. And there are pros and cons to that, but it's undercut the Arts and Science Council's ability to raise many millions of dollars through employee campaigns. And then some of it is that donors just don't see the need for a middleman of a United Arts Fund. And so all of this has been putting a lot of pressure on our art scene lately. A cultural task force has been studying this for the last year or so. They were supposed to come out with recommendations in January with how Charlotte can build and sustain a thriving arts and culture sector. It's now June, and they still have not issued their recommendations. And I think that they are wrestling with what is doable. They want a dedicated tax to go to the arts and culture, like some cities have. But again, trying to figure out how to make that happen with all the changes in our political picture and our changing public-private partnerships, makes it hard to get dedicated money for the arts. Finally, the legislature in North Carolina does not like cities. They've been spending a lot of time meddling in things that have traditionally been local decision-making, local control. So the yes but is yes. Our former mayor, Pat McCrory, on the left, he was mayor here for 14 years. He's now governor. Tom Tillis on the right is the Speaker of the House. He's from here. The House Majority Whip is from here. The Senate Finance Committee Chairman is from here. We have a lot of clout in the legislature. And yet, yes, but the legislature has spent a tremendous amount of effort undercutting cities' abilities to do things that cities do. The highest profile one here was the legislature's effort to take control of Charlotte's airport. The airport is one of our biggest assets, and it has been run well for 70 years. And for reasons that are still becoming clear, the legislature tried to take over our airport. They did take over the Asheville airport. They have tried to block cities from enforcing any tree protection ordinances. They have blocked cities from regulating billboards in any way. They have, just in the past week, eliminated the business privilege license tax, which is one of only two taxes that a municipality in North Carolina has control over, the property tax and this business license tax. It's going to cost Charlotte $8.5 million. A lot of other examples. They've tried to take away local smoking bans. They've tried to govern design guidelines. These are all things that wherever you come down on them, they've always been under local control. And in North Carolina, the cities are creations of the state. The legislature has complete control over the cities, and they have been exerting that control. And it's been making things really difficult on Charlotte and other cities just to control their own affairs. In conclusion, Charlotte's been on a really great run for 30 years or more, had a lot of momentum, done a lot of things right. Like I said, I love this city and we are doing a lot of things right, but times are changing. We're facing all kinds of pressures on a number of fronts that are really big, serious challenges, and they're going to require tremendous leadership from both the public sector and the private sector and the nonprofit sector to tackle these problems. And I would imagine that the same is true in Louisville and Lexington. So I just encourage you to not rest on your laurels. That's my concern for Charlotte, is that it's going to rest on its laurels. And if we do that, we're going to be in big trouble because other cities will eat our lunch. So we just got to constantly be vigilant. I'm happy to take any questions.
That very last point that you made regarding the state legislature taking over more, taking away cities' ability to regulate themselves, why do you think they're doing that?
Why do I think they're doing that?
Yeah.
A lot of the legislature is still represented by rural areas, and there's always been a tension, I mean, going back 100 years in North Carolina between the rural areas and the urban areas. You know, North Carolina is kind of the I-85 corridor, Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Raleigh-Durham, and then there's the rest of the state. And so geographically, you know, 80% of the state is rural, even though by population, the vast majority of North Carolinians live in the cities. But the legislature is disproportionately represented by people from rural areas, and I think that they, you know, I think they just feel like their interests, they want to make sure that their interests are represented, and I think they have kind of a chip on their shoulder about the cities. Some people, and I'm not sure where I come down on this, so I hesitate to mention it, but a lot of people think there's an element of revenge. It's a Republican legislature. A lot of cities are democratically controlled, and there have been some specific instances where cities have challenged things, tried to do things that the legislature didn't like, and then the legislature passes legislation that specifically targets that individual city in a way that gets back.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Sounds about right.
Just curious, what percentage of your state revenues, taxes that are raised here in Charlotte and go to the capital come back to Charlotte?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Say that again.
What percentage of the state tax revenue that's raised in Charlotte actually come back into Charlotte?
I don't know the answer to that. I think historically it's been pretty proportional. Mecklenburg represents about 10%. Mecklenburg County, Charlotte is in, represents about 10% of North Carolina's population. We represent more than that, I'm sure, on tax revenue that's sent to the state. I've never seen anything that suggests that we're being shortchanged. I think North Carolina is shortchanged a little bit from Washington. I think I've seen studies that say we send more to Washington than we get back. But I've never seen that about Charlotte and the legislature. Wow, you guys are letting me off easy. This is thank you, Jerry.
One of the things that Kentuckians do everywhere they go is spread good cheer. And we measure it by fifths and quarts and things like that. This is Woodford Reserve, which is one of our state's leading products. It's been blazoned with your name.
Wonderful.
We're going to give you this as a thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Great.